the roof over their head. A lot of times there's legal implications. They're on probation, they're in drug court. And, it's really at the core of the Oxford House mission, this idea that we're going to all get together and live together in order to hold each other accountable so that we stay abstinent, right? And if we don't, then there's a consequence. And I would actually argue it's one of the biggest tests of self-governance as far as how Oxford House is, because that's a big deal, right? I mean, there's a lot of models of sober homes where the houses make some decisions, they enforce some of their own rules, they kind of do their own thing from week to week, but they don't decide like who gets kicked out, they don't decide who moves in. But in Oxford House, we do. So it really is a very big test of our self-governance. And I'll tell you something just as an aside here, I won't take too long because I know I'm late and I don't want to keep you too long, but there are a lot of people right now, particularly in Virginia, that are skeptical of the Oxford House model, and that think that it's too much self-governance and that we can't handle it, that we can't be trusted to sort of do our own thing, have completely peer-run houses. And they're looking at our model and they're looking at other models. And the microscope is kind of on us right now at the moment. So how you all handle things like in the next 6 months, year, when it comes to big deal issues like expulsions, relapses, overdoses, is going to matter a lot in showing these people whether or not Oxford House is really a model that can work or not. So I will just say that, lately the microscope is kind of on us about this, and I'm confident we can rise to the occasion. And the process matters. And it's not just what you do, especially when it comes to expulsions and things like that. It's also how you do it. The process, the procedure in Oxford House matters. Okay, so just real briefly touch on the idea of residency versus membership. So, in Oxford House, we're not actually technically the tenant, right? The tenant is the house itself, and we are all members of the house. So there's a little bit of a distinction there, and it sort of makes a distinction between the idea of expulsion and eviction, right? An individual member of an Oxford House does not get evicted because they're not technically a tenant. They're a member of the Oxford House, and when they get asked to leave, they get expelled. Maybe some of you guys will recognize this. I didn't type up the whole thing, but that's the line on the back page of the application for membership that talks about how when you apply to an Oxford House, you understand that because of the federal law that created these loan funds, we have to do certain things like kick people out when they use. But you'll see in that last line, it also says, in accepting these terms, the applicant excludes himself or herself from the normal due process afforded by local landlord-tenant laws. So we don't, that's why we're able to ask people to leave immediately when they relapse, when they have a recurrence of use, I mean. Okay, so let's take a look at tradition 3. No member of an Oxford House is ever asked to leave without cause, a dismissal vote by the membership because of drinking, drug use, or disruptive behavior. So a couple points there. One, there are 2 reasons for expulsion, and only 2 reasons. One is a recurrence of substance use, a relapse. The other is disruptive behavior. And people get expelled from Oxford Houses for one or the other. They don't get expelled for both, right? There's no such thing as an expulsion for relapse and disruptive behavior. You guys have got to start to, properly classify the decisions you're making about asking people to leave. So there's 2 reasons for expulsion, but there's only one method of expulsion, and it's the vote. That is it. That is how you get expelled from an Oxford House. It's the vote. Relapse behavior is not a reason for expulsion. Okay, we have a lot of confusion about that, and a lot of houses will say, oh, well, we kicked somebody out, we had to kick them out for relapse behavior. I'm like, I don't even know, what are you talking about? Like, Relapse is a reason that people get kicked out of an Oxford house, not relapse behavior. The behavior may inform your decision as to how to vote. The behavior should inform your decision as to whether or not you believe a relapse has occurred, but you don't get kicked out for relapse behavior. You get kicked out for relapse. Let's just look at a couple things as far as whether or not they determine whether someone is expelled for relapse. They admit to using. No, that is not the determining factor as to whether or not they will be expelled. There's a positive drug test on the table. That is not a determining factor for whether someone is expelled for relapse. The vote, it's the House vote, and that's it. Now, obviously, if somebody admits they use, or somebody is asked to take a urinalysis and it's positive and everybody believes they've used, that information is going to inform our decision to vote yes, to say we believe a relapse has occurred. And it's a vote. When it comes to relapse, it's not a vote as to whether or not to expel. It's a vote as to whether or not a relapse has occurred, a recurrence of use has occurred. It's really about establishing that fact. And if a majority of the House votes yes, then the expulsion just follows automatically from establishing that a relapse has occurred. With disruptive behavior, it's a little different. With disruptive behavior, it actually is the case that when you're voting whether or not to expel. Okay, so why do we use the vote? Well, as I've mentioned before, sort of this whole idea of self-governance based on democracy is fundamental to the Oxford House model. It is really kind of the secret sauce of why Oxford House works so well. And it's also the case that if we have to vote, we really have no choice but to pay attention to each other. Like, we're determining based on our opinion whether a relapse has occurred or whether our housemates are abstinent or not. We need to know how they're doing. We need to pay attention and be a little bit engaged in their lives. That's the idea of Oxford. And why vote? Because we trust you. Because we know that we, people in recovery, like, we know what a relapse looks like, and we know what abstinence and recovery look like. And Oxford House trusts that you can make those decisions. We really do. And you should trust that you can make those decisions. You should trust your gut when it comes to this stuff. Like, it's always right, and we don't have any problems with houses, pulling the trigger prematurely on a suspicion of relapse. What we have problems with is houses where everybody kind of knows damn well that someone has relapsed and they're still not confronting it. Or they just are like second guessing themselves or something, even though they've seen all the behavior and they know damn well. So trust your gut, it's always right. All right, I'm going to run down some steps to addressing a relapse, and then we'll look at a few of them in more detail. So the first is that we observe some behavior, right? I mean, someone comes home, they're slurring their speech, they're acting a little weird, or maybe they've been isolating like crazy for days, or it could be other information. Maybe we were told by someone that they saw one of our housemates down at the bar drinking last night or something like that. We call an emergency meeting immediately. We call an emergency meeting of all the members that are available. That includes the person in question. Oops. There we go. The House confronts the member on the behavior. There should be some discussion. Give them an opportunity to sort of, give their side of the story, what the accusation is or what the concerns are. This is hard sometimes. This is what you signed up for, though, when you agreed to move into an Oxford House. This is, again, part of that sort of secret sauce that allows Oxford House to do better at supporting people in their recovery. We have to kind of do that work. We have to invest in the process. And like, sometimes that's uncomfortable stuff, like confronting our housemates about the fact that we've been watching their behavior and we think they've relapsed. Take minutes. Very important to take minutes. A motion is made that the recurrence of use has occurred, right? So that's what happens at the end of that meeting. One way or the other, you put a motion on the floor that a relapse has occurred, and then you vote as to whether or not the House believes that has happened. And if the vote is yes, if the majority of the vote says yes, then we of course let the House member know that they've been expelled and they're given a certain amount of time to pack. And the House potentially assists with the member in next steps. So a brief word on drug tests. They are not part of the Oxford House model or system of operations whatsoever. You will not find a reference to them in the House manual or really, frankly, any other literature. They're not necessary in order to expel someone for relapse. And as I said, they of course can be used, and houses will use them as information to inform their vote. But there are a lot of problems with drug testing. They really do, honestly, often complicate very straightforward situations where the House knows that someone has relapsed, and then they decide to drug test them, and then maybe it gets misused or misread, or they know how to beat the test or something like that. A lot of people are pretty savvy about that stuff. It really sort of betrays the Oxford House model too. Like, we're trying to create a situation where individuals are living together in, not in an institution, right? We don't want Oxford House to be it's not the probation office, and it's not a treatment center. So this idea of like constantly, you should never be doing random drug tests in an Oxford House. It's just not what we do. At the absolute most, maybe isolated testing of a specific person that you are specifically suspicious of. But frankly, you would be better off just trusting your gut and going on behaviors. And in violation of Tradition 7. Tradition 7 says that we're a non-professional organization, not an unprofessional, but a non-professional. And when we start acting like a medical facility or probation office, we betray that. Okay. Let's talk briefly about emergency meetings. So if it's about relapse, that meeting has to be called immediately, like as soon as humanly possible. For disruptive behavior, it can wait, depends, as long as nobody's at risk. I'm not talking about like a fight breaks out in the house. That needs to be addressed immediately. But it's a little more important that it not just be all the members available at that moment, but to try to be as many members as possible. Houses sometimes get into the bad habit of kind of using the disruptive behavior process in a way that's about personalities, not principles. But I will give you guys a lot of credit. You rarely, if never, do that with the process of addressing relapse and questioning that and potentially expelling people. And it's a majority vote of the members present, not the total membership of the House. Okay. The member in question must be present. The person that we think may have relapsed has to be at this meeting. Okay. Democratic process still matters. And that person is, until a vote has happened, an absolute full member, a full voting member, I should say, of the House. And they get to participate and their vote counts. Make sure that you're giving everyone a reasonable opportunity to attend, okay, particularly the person in question. And if they refuse, right? I mean, so we really have to have that person be there. But, okay, obviously, if they absolutely refuse to attend the meeting and you guys have made it clear, we are addressing your status in the House, we are addressing, whether or not you are sober or something like that, you have to be here. It's, later tonight at 7 o'clock. Make sure you document that, okay? Because you will be asked. If you hold an expulsion meeting without the person present, I promise you, either your chapter or the outreach is going to ask you to prove that you made an effort to actually make sure the person was there. Maybe the member could become too disruptive. That does happen, certainly with relapses, particularly if they're really inebriated. So just make sure you document that well in the meeting minutes. If you reach a point where you can't continue, allowing the person to be there because they're being disruptive. And if the member is absent for more than 3 days. The membership contract, which is one of the fundamental forms that you have to fill out when you live in an Oxford House. If any of you have not seen this, if you live in a house where you're not familiar with this, please talk to your outreach workers or your chapter officers about the fact that you need the membership contract. But it talks about how if people are away from the house for longer than 3 days and it's prearranged, the house can consider that a relapse in their absence. And they can have that meeting in their absence, but they have to wait until the person has been gone and in a non-arranged, prearranged way, sorry, for 3 days. Up until that point, okay, no emergency meeting, right? Up until that point,
So
no
they can't
voting
hear
to
us right
expel.
now.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. No lock changing, okay? You may not change the locks on your house prior to expelling someone because they've been missing in action for a few days. That is not acceptable. And you certainly cannot do anything with the person's property prior to them returning and the house confronting them and then potentially getting expelled or not. Okay, a little more about the emergency meeting. The documentation in the minutes is very important. If the secretary is not there, if they're not one of the people or they're the person in question, then designate someone else to take the minutes. Just use the regular house meeting minutes, but there's up at the top, you can check off emergency meeting and then you can just do the roll call and jump to new business. It often will be reviewed by the Housing Service Committee or outreach. That's particularly true with expulsion for disruptive behavior. You'll hear me mention this before, but those are often situations where we will kind of review what happened and see if it was done appropriately. That does not happen near as much with expulsions for relapse. We really do trust that you guys are making good decisions when it comes to that because you're the ones that are living there with each other, watching the behavior. It will often become a legal document. That is really true. The minutes of an expulsion meeting can end up becoming a legal document. So it really is important that the Secretary of the House and the rest of the House make sure that everything's going into it. Make sure you detail all the behaviors, the reasons why people are concerned, as well as any responses from the individual, and make sure that the motion and the vote are also both recorded accurately. And by the way, outreach team, please feel free to jump in if I'm missing something here, or you think of something else that you can add. All right. So I'm going to jump real quick and talk a little bit about disruptive behavior, just in general as a concept, and then we'll come back to the process of expelling, whether that expulsion is for a recurrence of use or for disruptive behavior. And we often will have a whole talk, like at our state convention or something like that, just about how houses can deal with disruptive behavior. So this is going to be a pretty quick treatment of it. We do sometimes spend a little more time on that, and we certainly probably will in February. So hopefully we'll see a lot of you guys there. Expulsion for disruptive behavior in Oxford House is really viewed as an absolute last resort action, okay? Oxford House is designed to be a place where we come and a group of our peers helps address our behavior, helps us change our behavior. If we did not need our behavior changed, we would not need to live in an Oxford House. So let's remember that everybody comes to the table with some behavior that they're working on. And that we all agreed that we would live in an environment where people would be supportive, they could be confronted positively about their behavior. And really, if a house reaches a point where they have to ask someone to leave because of their behavior, it's really kind of a failure on the part of the house, because the whole purpose of us all living together is to help each other change our behavior. And if you ask someone to leave, then you have failed to help them change their behavior. And that might not mean that they're not suited for Oxford House. Just remember that too. It might mean that they're just not a good fit for your specific house. And a lot of times when people are expelled for disruptive behavior, we will recommend that they apply to other houses. Like I said, it needs to be an absolute last resort. There must be an effort on the part of the house to address the behavior prior to expulsion, whether that be through enforcing the house rules or just addressing the person's behavior in the meeting, or fines. A lot of the rules call for fines. If the person repeats the same behaviors over again, it even says in your rules you can increase the fines. And only after you've done all that stuff about a specific behavior would you then, if the behavior continues, go to a disruptive behavior contract. And only then, if they break the terms of that contract, would you even be considering expulsion. Very important to document all your attempts to address the behavior. Like I said, just like with emergency meetings, it's very likely that the Housing Service Committee or outreach or someone is going to ask to review that stuff, particularly with disruptive behavior, because we want to make sure the houses are staying true to the idea that we do this only as a last resort. This is a quote from some of our literature about disruptive behavior and the miracle of change. The individual personal conflicts that erupt within the house are not dangerous unless the group conscience of the house is jeopardized. If these matters cannot be solved, then the alternative is a behavioral contract. The contract is not meant to be punishment, but a tool to enable the person to correct behaviors.
But it's also about how you address the person regarding the disruptive behavior. So
Yes.
don't go at them. Do it kindly.
Absolutely.
Hey,
I
Paul,
mean, yes.
I kind of have like, I guess I would call it like a kind of a scenario question. What if we have a member under his new member probationary period dealing with disruptive behavior with them?
I mean, it's a good question. The new member contract is not per se a disruptive behavior contract, right? Like just being new is not disruptive, right? So you're not already on one. You're on a contract of sorts, I get that, but you're not on a disruptive behavior contract. Now, a house might have a shorter leash, so to speak, on people that are brand new. I mean, if a guy moves into the house and within a week, they're already breaking 3 or 4 different rules and they're not coming home by curfew or whatever, like, you know, I would expect the house to be pretty swift in addressing how that's not going to be okay, but they still would need to go on a disruptive behavior contract. Okay. Some behavior, however, really must result in immediate expulsion. There's not a lot of it. This is another quote from the guidelines from expulsion. Disruptive behavior includes participating in any criminal activity such as drug trafficking, prostitution, shoplifting, assault, and theft within the house, or any other activity that may threaten the standing of the Oxford House in the community. In addition, violence, any threat of violence or destruction of property is considered disruptive behavior. Exhibition of any part of the above definition of disruptive behavior by members of chartered Oxford houses should without question result in immediate expulsion. So it's in your house rules. There's a small list of things. It's basically, and I don't know why they singled out a few different crimes here. It's kind of weird, but breaking the law, violence, threats of violence, stealing, and failing to tell the house about another house member that has relapsed. Those are basically the list of things where we don't go to a disruptive behavior contract. We don't fine or pull up. We just call an emergency meeting and we expel. Okay, so for all the other stuff, of course, we do at some point, if the behavior continues, get to a disruptive behavior contract. That needs to be discussed and voted on by the House, right? The senior member, the president, they don't make contracts. They don't put people on contracts. When I hear that someone in a house said to one of the new guys, I'm gonna put you on a contract, I know I have a house that is not running the way it's supposed to, because that is not the democratic process. This has to be discussed and decided upon by the group. There are 3 parts to a disruptive behavior contract. One is the length of the contract, which typically is 1, 2, or 3 months. We used to say 30, 60, or 90 days, but we sort of decided that's just a little complicated. Let's just keep it simple. It's 1, 2, or 3 months. With the 30, 60, or 90 days, people would be pulling out a calendar and counting days. Just 1 month, 2 month, 3 month. It's a lot easier.
Definitely indicate the dates, though.
Yes, the start and end date.
Date, start and end. Put the
Yes.
dates. Don't write 30 days. Write
Right.
the specific date.
Thank you, Debbie. Yes. And you've got to spell out the behavior, the observed issues, and you need to be specific about it. And then the third part is the terms of the contract. How is the person going to change their behavior? What is the house expecting of them? You know, what do they need to do to satisfy this disruptive behavior contract, or what do they need to not do during that time? Be specific. The terms should address the behaviors in question. Okay, so you know, it doesn't really make that much sense if my, behavior is that I keep paying my EES late and the house says, well, you can't use the living room or you got to go to meetings or something like that. The terms that you say, this is what we need you to do, or this is what we need you not to do, they need to be related to the behavior in question. And you can get pretty creative about that. I mean, talk to your outreach workers. I know that they've dealt with these sort of situations a lot. This doesn't always just have to be a default, oh, we put them back on a curfew and they have to go to meetings. It's kind of a lazy way to deal with disruptive behavior contracts. Look at the behavior and come up with a creative solution for how to help the person. And expulsion only happens after the actual specific terms of that contract have been broken. One more quote. Many of us choose to use a 12-step program. This teaches us that service to other alcoholics and addicts is a vital part of our own recovery. What greater opportunity could we have than helping a roommate explore solutions to their behavioral problems? We've seen many individuals turn their lives around while living in an Oxford house. So this is what it's about, guys. This is the reason we're all here together. Okay, just a quick word on non-payment of EES. I said at the top that there's only 2 reasons you can get expelled from an Oxford house. One is a relapse, recurrence of use, and the other is disruptive behavior. And that's true because non-payment of EES is just one version of disruptive behavior. Okay, so, and I just want to touch on this. You guys should know this, all right? But like this particular version of disruptive behavior has some specific guidelines in your rules because it's that important, right? Because the houses are financially self-supporting, and if people don't pay their EES, you guys don't pay your bills, and then we have big problems. But in those rules, okay, there is, the timeline is a little different than it would be for other disruptive behavior contracts. But, in the first week, if you're under 2 weeks behind, you get a $25 fine. Once you cross the threshold of the 2 weeks or more behind in EES and fines, you get fined again. And then the house has to put you on a disruptive behavior contract. Like I said, the length will be different because this disruptive behavior contract, as it's spelled out in the house rules, must require that they pay the full negative balance, and it has to be no later than right before the next time EES is due. So if I'm sitting in my house meeting on Sunday night and one of the house members is now 2.5 weeks behind because they haven't paid 2 weeks in a row and they got fines and they haven't paid any of it, we're going to put that person on a disruptive behavior contract for non-payment of EES. The absolute longest we could give them to pay all of it is 9:59 p.m. that coming Saturday, because at 10 p.m. that coming Saturday, another week's EES is due. If you actually follow those rules as they are written in your house rules, it is impossible for someone to get 3 weeks or more behind. And you should follow them. I like to talk about the house that used to have a rule, and they don't anymore, but they did for a while, where the EES was due on Saturday night, like all the other houses. And on Sunday morning, if the house woke up and you had not paid your EES, they kicked you out. That was it. They just kicked you out. And over the course of the entire time that they did that, they probably had that rule. They were operating that way for about 3 or 4, maybe 4 years. The entire time they did that, guess how many people they kicked out?
None.
0.
Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
Because when you raise the expectation, people will meet it. When you explain clearly what is expected of people, they will prioritize it. Nobody wants to get kicked out of their house on Sunday morning. So guess what? They came up with the EES. It didn't end up being, I had to pay my cell phone, or I got child support, or this thing came up with my car, whatever bullshit we hear week after week in Oxford houses. They prioritize their EES. All right. So now back to expulsions. We've talked about the emergency meeting and some of the details of that. Now, as far as actually carrying out an expulsion, whether it's for relapse or for disruptive behavior, although there will still be a few differences here we'll talk about. Your rules all say that the person has to leave within 40 minutes. So that's what we go by. But there are some reasons to consider delaying. All right. So if someone is expelled for recurrence of use and it is late at night, they are significantly intoxicated, we're concerned they might be a risk to themselves or others, houses will typically decide to allow that person to to sleep it off, to spend the night, to get up in the morning and leave. Make sure you document that in your meeting minutes. Make sure we're talking about people that don't, pose an immediate threat or disruption to the house, particularly with disruptive behavior, sort of non-threatening disruptive behavior. It is even more common for the house to say, we're going to give you, a few days even. And keep in mind, that expulsions for disruptive behavior, any kind of expulsion for disruptive behavior, like the person does have the right to talk to the chapter or outreach about it. So a lot of times it's important that we don't just sort of kick them out quickly because they might need some time to do that. And I promise, even if you've already kicked them out and it needs to be reviewed, we're gonna review it. I mean, we will absolutely say to a house that the way you handled this was just not appropriate, and this is not an expulsion that can stand. Okay, make sure member will not be home alone. Right, if you're gonna extend the time, like you're gonna let the person sleep it off until tomorrow morning, make sure someone's gonna be around in the morning when they wake up so that they're not there in the house having just been kicked out alone. Bad things happen. People walk out of the house with stuff. And if you're a new house or a conditionally chartered house, you're still paying off your loan and you want to consider letting someone have more than that 40 minutes, please just touch base with your outreach worker about that. Technically, when you're in that situation where you're that new, you're not supposed to be deviating from your rules unless you get permission from an outreach worker. And return EES immediately if possible. If you have the ability, because you're calling a special meeting and everybody is there, return their unused EES right then and there at the expulsion, okay? If that cannot happen for some reason, someone that could not make the meeting is the guy that holds the key to the checkbook or whatever, then do it as quickly as possible, absolutely no later than the very next house meeting. Do not give us this crap about how you have 30 days and you're gonna take your time about it. I know what that's about. It's about resentments. That's what
Yeah,
that's
the
about.
sooner you give them their money, the quicker they go away.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and that's what houses have caused their own problems because they want to wait for whatever reason, and this person doesn't want to wait.
Right.
So give them whatever money you owe them so they do go away. Usually once they get their check, you probably end up storing their belongings.
Yeah.
Especially if they relapsed.
Yeah. And so if you're, and just so people are clear about this, what we're talking about is in Oxford House, whether you leave on good terms, whether you leave voluntarily or you're asked to leave, we prorate your EES to the day, down to the day. So if I paid my week on Saturday and I got kicked out on Tuesday, then the house owes me for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They owe me 4 days of EES.
This is one of the things that I respect most about Oxford House. And the reason that I like, if the people are there that have the ability to write the check, you're in the meeting, write the check, because it's, we don't take money from people who don't live there. Right. So if they're no longer a member there, then you need to stand on that principle of, we will not charge you for a single day that you did not actually live in our house. Right. And although you don't live here anymore, it's your money. It's not house money anymore after that.
Right. Yeah, this is one of the ways that we're pretty principled, because our houses aren't trying to make a profit for anyone.
Exactly.
That includes finding them after they've left.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that you can't do that, period. Okay. Fines are designed to help people change their behavior. So finding someone after they have stopped living in the house is not about changing their behavior. It's about you trying to get back at them or express some resentment or some dope fiend shit like that.
So that means if I get expelled on Tuesday and the house meeting's on Thursday, you can't sit there and say, okay, we're going to write your check at the house meeting on Thursday, but then fine me for whatever at that house meeting because I'm not there to vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about some of these other steps that we reviewed earlier as far as the expulsion process is concerned, helping potentially with the next step, right? So we don't withdraw our support of our fellow recovering addicts and alcoholics just because they have had a recurrence of use. All right. We continue to try to support them. We cannot allow them to live with us. That's the way this model works. But we have to try to help. So make sure you contact family or other people that are indicated. You absolutely should have. And our state association chairperson, John McCormick, showed me an example of this that I thought was great that they use up in their house, where they have a printed list that they provide to someone when they are expelled that has, resources like treatment centers or crisis stabilization or hotlines for like NAAA or suicide or, things like that, shelters, other assistance like that, just to try to help the person sort of make some decent decisions, even though they've just been kicked out of an Oxford house. And they might potentially need transportation. Now, this is an issue that some people in Oxford House debate back and forth, like after someone's been expelled for relapse, should another member of the house really go, put them in their car and drive them off? I've actually seen people not come back from that scenario, and it's where they relapsed also. So that can be tricky. It ought to be at least 2 people. But we certainly would like to help people get to where they need to go if they have a plan, if it's a hospital, or if it's, a detox or something like that. And we certainly cannot allow them to leave in their own transportation if they're under the influence. You can be held criminally liable for that. So don't let that happen. Okay. Oh, the recurrence of use contingency plan. So I'm going to show you this document, but we are not using this. This is being used in some other parts of the Oxford House world. I think it's a great form because I think it helps in this sort of stressful situation about someone being expelled and what are we going to do and how can we help them and who needs to know and are they going to comply with it? It helps a lot to have this already in place so everybody fills it out. What I think we're probably going to do is take the information this form asks, here it is, and merge it into the membership contract, which I'll show you in a second too. I referred to that earlier, but it basically just, in advance, you will say, hey, if I do relapse, here's the people you need to contact. Here's some places I'm willing to go, whether it's my friend's house, my sponsor's house, my mom's house, or I don't know. I went to this treatment center, take me back there if that's what happens. Who should be notified? The stuff at the bottom is actually the same stuff that you'll find in the membership contract. So that's why I think they'll be combined well. So speaking of all the documents, documentation is important when it comes to expulsions. It's important with every decision we make in Oxford House, but it's particularly important when it comes to expulsions, all right? So secure documents. The documents, and what I'm talking about here is when we move into a house, there's several things we fill out, several things we sign, and the house is supposed to keep that all on file. If the person is being expelled, you should secure those documents. In fact, in advance of that at this point, a lot of houses will actually make copies of those documents and put them in where they lock the checkbook up, or they'll scan them and save them to the computer, to the house computer's hard drive or to the Google Drive with the house email. So what are these documents we're talking about? A signed copy of the application, right? We always have them sign the application. If they don't fill out the application in front of us, if we do an interview remotely and they fill it out by phone or by Zoom or something, just make sure that they sign it when you're orienting them when they first move in. Signed copy of the house rules, a signed copy of the membership contract. I just mentioned the recurrence of use contingency plan, emergency meeting minutes, right? So it's important for you to secure the document about the meeting where they got kicked out, emergency medical info, and for disruptive behavior, certainly a copy of the disruptive behavior contract and any other house meeting minutes in which that behavior was addressed. Because like I said, particularly with disruptive behavior, there's a good chance someone like a housing service committee chairperson or an outreach worker is going to come in and say, just, show me that you tried to, address this prior to kicking this person out. And the personal property list. That's definitely an important one. Unfortunately, sometimes when people are leaving, things walk out the door that don't belong to them. That personal property list and the house property list is there to protect the house and make sure that they can identify what stuff belongs to the house. This is the membership contract. So this just goes over some of the big fundamental rules. You know, you agree that you'll have to leave immediately if you're expelled. You agree that if you're gone for 3 days, it could be treated as a relapse. It talks about, you know, having 72 hours in order to get your own property out of the house before the house will do anything about it. We'll talk about that in a second. And then that you have 30 days to come get the property. So if someone is offering a little resistance about an expulsion, just some thoughts about that. Don't call the police unless you really have to, unless there's really a risk to someone's safety, whether it's the expelled person or the other members, or there's actual criminal acts happening, you know, don't call the police. Our model is sound and it sits on sound legal ground. No offense, sometimes cops are dumb and they don't feel like dealing with stuff. And if you call the police and you get a dumb cop that doesn't feel like dealing with it and they don't help, you know, now you've hit the nuclear button and it didn't work. So you're really going to have trouble, you know, getting this person to leave. Call the Housing Service Committee chair, call your outreach worker. You would really be surprised at how a group of Housing Service Committee reps and chapter officers and stuff coming over to the house will make a difference and will resolve the issue, where just the person will realize that they're kind of fighting the group that's not going to sort of relent, and they get their shit together and they leave. Secure their paperwork. That's particularly true if you think they're resisting the expulsion, because you might need to use that paperwork. This has happened. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen that sometimes we'll actually have to go down to like a magistrate's office that night and show them all the paperwork, and then get a trespassing, or I forget what the right, it's not a warrant, but basically paperwork that says the person can't be there. And then if they continue to stay, you can use that paperwork to call the police. And it works very effectively. It doesn't happen often, like I said, but it does work very effectively. So make sure that's one reason you want to hold on to all that paperwork. Now, we're talking about this out in the open, right? So remember, everybody here at this meeting, if they relapse, they're going to head to the cabinet to get their paperwork because they're smart. So secure your paperwork in advance of that. All right. Discuss the prospect of returning to Oxford House, right? If somebody is dragging their feet or resisting an expulsion, remind them that they don't want to blow their chance to be able to come back into Oxford, that we want to help people. We want them to return. But if somebody really resists an expulsion, that's the kind of person that should never be accepted back into an Oxford House again. And maybe talking to them about that will help. It has actually. I've seen that happen a lot of times. Contact family, contact emergency contacts. You're probably going to do that anyway. Probation officers, man, they're really good at helping us get people out of a house. That's all. Or a drug court coordinator, somebody. That's all it takes is one of them picking up the phone and calling that person, being like, hey, if you don't pack your stuff in the next 5 minutes, I'm violating your probation. They start moving. All right, and proceed with the next steps, right? I mean, even if they're resisting this expulsion, you have a key code lock you probably need to change at this point because they've actually been expelled, right? You have, maybe they're listed as the secretary who gets the text message, change that stuff, elect new officers, get new bank signers, you know, move forward with what you need to do to make your house run right, even if they are resisting. And really, it very rarely comes to that. People usually create a lot more trouble for themselves when they resist than when they comply. Okay, so what else about after they've been expelled? So they have 3 days to arrange to pack up and remove their property. That's in the membership contract. That's how we do it. You may not touch their stuff during that period of time at all whatsoever. We are very serious about this. There is just nothing more reprehensible than a house, an Oxford house, that decides to steal somebody's stuff after they have relapsed or been kicked out of the house. You got to be seriously low scumbag to do that. It has happened. Don't even let your house get close to being suspected of that. Taking pictures is a good idea with the person there or with 2 or 3 or more people, right, of the room, so that you can kind of protect the house and say, hey, this is what it looked like. This is what was here when the person was kicked out. Make sure that you're only allowing that member to come pick up the property or people they designate, which is one of the great things about that contingency plan. It actually has a space where it says, here are a couple people I'm approving in advance. They can come get my property, because sometimes we run into some trouble with that. I mean, sometimes people get kicked out and they end up in jail within like 24 or 48 hours. And then we're having a hard time getting them to give permission for their mom or their ex or whoever to come pick up their stuff. So good to have that in advance in that contingency plan. And the members need to schedule a time, right? And the house needs to make sure that 2 people are there. And you need to monitor the person, okay? You don't just let them in the door and go do your thing again, all right? Like, you have to actually hang around and make sure that you're referencing that personal property list versus house property list, and make sure that nothing walks out the door that does not belong to the person. Okay. So if the 3 days pass and the person does not end up getting all their stuff, or maybe they get some of it, or they don't even respond, only now, after 3 days after the expulsion, can the members, not alone, right? Never, ever alone, go into that person's room and very carefully and respectfully bag it up, or box it up, and put it somewhere safe and secure where it's not going to get ruined, and it's not going to get taken, and it's not going to get rained on. Obviously, we expect you to be able to prepare the room for a new member as soon as possible. And I promise you that if we feel like a house did not handle that process properly and respect that person's property and store it somewhere safe, or there's questions about who went into the room or didn't, we are going to hold the house liable for any missing or damaged property. We absolutely will. Provide additional written notification of expelled members' deadline to pick up property. Right. So I know that there's the rule that they have to come get it within 30 days, but we need to provide some kind of additional written notification of that deadline once they've been expelled. We used to always do that as a letter with a return receipt requested to, one of the contacts or addresses they provided on the application. Nowadays, you've got email. You've even got text messages, like you can do sort of a formal legal notice via that, but then you're just going to need to make sure you save those or somehow put those like on the house's computer or something like that.
Print them out and attach them to the meeting minutes.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good idea. And so any property that remains after that deadline will be, and you need to make this clear in that communication, will be disposed of or donated. It may not, no matter what that person says or how long the stuff's been there, it may never become the property of the house collectively. It may never become the property of a house member, and it may never become the property of anyone else associated with anyone in the house. It gets thrown away or it gets donated, and that's it. I don't care how nice that big TV is. I don't care how nice those clothes are. It gets thrown away or donated.
Can it get donated to another Oxford house?
No.
No.
Yeah, good question, but no. No, we really, and I know, look, I've seen situations where somebody has left and we kind of almost know for sure this person doesn't care or they're okay with it or whatever, and there's something the house could really use. I understand how tempting it is. You've been through a lot dealing with this person and kicking them out. We really have to take the high ground when it comes to this whole process and just be above any question of how we handled it. And so that means their stuff can never become our stuff.
So
Okay.
I got a question, Paul.
Yeah.
What if you have a member that's expelled and he knows he can't take stuff with him? Say he wants to donate stuff to the house. Can you have him fill out a donation form and he can donate it to the house?
No.
That's a good
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. I'm sorry. That was a good question. I imagine it's possible that might be okay. Yeah, if it's handled properly and it's really documented and there's, yeah, I would strongly caution from houses from pursuing that, because it could easily be interpreted that they're putting some pressure on someone to donate their property. So I would be careful.
It could also be viewed as bribery to let them get back into the house.
Something like that. Absolutely. Yeah.
If the person gets mad, they can just come back and take it.
Yeah, I would really steer away from that. Actually, the more I think about it, the more I say, no, that shouldn't happen. It needs to get donated to a legitimate charity. It really shouldn't become the property of the house. It should never become the property of the house. Look, you guys, if you're running your house well and you're enforcing your rules, like, you should have money in the bank to go buy that big TV or go buy that new like sectional or whatever. So run your house well, and you don't have to worry about getting donations from some dude that just relapsed. Okay, like, you can just go spend house money and get cool stuff. Expelled members are not banned from other Oxford houses. Sometimes we get a little confused about this, right? Like, if someone is under the influence, obviously they are not permitted on the property of any Oxford house, and if somebody lets them on the property, they can and will be expelled themselves. But just because someone was expelled last week from an Oxford house, and assuming they're sober, like, that doesn't mean they can't be a guest at another Oxford house to go, see a friend or something. Okay, and then the providing the information. So this is the last step, I think, in the post-expulsion guidelines, is we have this email list serve, so to speak, where the houses will get on and let everybody know, hey, unfortunately, we just expelled Paul Stevens. He left owing no money, or he left owing $170. He expelled for relapse. He was expelled for disruptive behavior. And we send those out. And that's been great. It's been very helpful. It has been an awful lot of emails coming into all of our houses' inboxes for a while now. And we are looking at changing that system to where you'll be able to go onto the state website, that's vaoxfordhouse.org, and add the people that have been expelled to a list there. And then we'll stop doing it via email, and all the houses will just know they can quickly reference that sort of almost database or spreadsheet if someone applies that they believe has lived in another house.
When you do send out the email, you need first and last names.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't help to just go, hey guys, we kicked John out tonight.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
I like the fact that when these emails are being exchanged, it's us in our community, sort of communicating with each other. But like, seriously, these emails are going out to like 150 houses. You don't need to hit reply all and say, thanks, I got it. Okay, like, you don't need to do that. Like,
No response is required.
you're just adding an
I
additional
have something to
150
say
more
about-
emails.
I have something to say about what you mentioned earlier. In our chapter 13 bylaws, it says you're expelled for relapse. You cannot go on any Oxford property for 30 days.
That's what he said.
I thought he said that you're
Oh, I
like,
didn't say that at all.
Good. That's
Then you would go off of the bylaws, right?
okay.
I have one thing to add about the emails. A lot of houses are emailing that when they get new members in. I know that's not required, and that really floods our inboxes because a lot of houses email every time they get a new member.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was not what was this. You're right, that it was not intended for that system. I mean, I love the idea that houses are sort of excited about having new people and wanting to let everybody know. What we talked about trying to do, once we have it where you can report to the state website people that have been expelled, then what we're probably going to try to do is just get the houses maybe more in the habit of just doing that locally. So if they want to send an email out that says, hey, we're all excited, Debbie Robinson moved into our house, that email might just go out to the local chapter houses instead of everybody in the state, because you're right. I really don't need to know in Winchester about Susie moving into a house in Virginia Beach.
Right.
All right, so Paul, when you get this database on the website, right?
Yeah.
So you post your expulsion and how much money that this person may owe to your house. Now, these houses are going to have to remember, okay, if somebody comes back in 45 days and pays that debt off to move back into a house, then they need to report that to the database as well, right?
That's correct. Yes, they will. Yes, if the
Okay.
debt has been paid,
Yep.
the house will have to go in there and adjust it. That's correct. And houses do that. I mean, they send out emails saying the debt was paid.
Right.
But also with the new members email going out, it has, because not all houses are sending out the expulsion email, And then we get an email saying, well, he lived at our house and he owes us this.
Right.
And had that house not sent out that email welcoming that new member, that they would have never known. It's because not all secretaries are doing what they're supposed to be doing as far as expulsion emails go.
Something else I just skipped over here that the secretary is supposed to be doing is you got to remember when an expulsion happens, make sure that you document that on your house calendar, right? Hanging on the wall there, because at the end of the month, you're going to have to fill out that Google form that asks how many people left your house. Did they leave voluntarily, or was it for relapse, or was it for disruptive behavior? And if you just have that all noted on your calendar there, it's super easy. You don't have to go through all your paperwork or try to remember or anything. And you're actually supposed to be maintaining a hard copy annual form of the house activity report. So that monthly information that you send in via the Google form, like there's actually a form for you to keep all that on one page and just kind of keep it posted somewhere in the house. So just remember that the secretary is supposed to do that after an expulsion or after, you know, an interview, or after, you know, the day somebody moves in. They should always be recording those things on a calendar that are going to be asked on the house activity
Right.
report every month.
In January, I send it out. For the last couple of years, I've sent it out to all the houses beginning of the year. So 2022, because we changed the date at the top. And then I send it to all the houses asking you to post this so you can keep track. So that will be coming out again. But it's like you said, at the end of the year, you end up with this form that has the entire year of what happened in your house.
Mhm.
And it helps. It's so much easier because in order to do the monthly house activity report correctly, you have to know what you ended up before you can do December's. You got to know what you ended November's with, because that's your beginning number for December. Paul, can you just touch on the signing of the disruptive behavior contract?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so the disruptive behavior contract has a space at the bottom where the individual being put on the disruptive behavior contract is supposed to sign. The other members of the house are supposed to sign. Once in a while, somebody gets all up in their feelings about the fact that they've been confronted at their house and called out on their behavior, and they don't feel like signing the contract. So that is not an expellable offense, okay? Not signing the disruptive behavior contract is not a reason to kick someone out. Now, if I'm living in a house and we put someone on a disruptive behavior contract and they refuse to sign it, that is certainly going to inform me that there's a really good chance we're going to be holding an emergency meeting sometime in the next week or so, because this guy is not about changing his behavior. And that will help sort of prepare me for the fact that we tried and we're going to end up kicking this person out. But if they, I don't care if they sign it or not. It's valid. Let's just say this. If you guys sit down in a house meeting and you discuss the issue and you put a motion on the floor for a contract and you vote on the terms of it, that contract is good and enforceable, whether that person signs that paperwork or not. Is that good, Debbie?
Yeah.
All right.
I got one question about your disruptive behavior contracts.
Sure.
Okay, so if, like, I know in our rules here, if you're on a financial contract and you're behind in your EES, you automatically have an 11 o'clock curfew, right?
Okay, first of all, there's no such thing as a financial contract. Let's try to get in the habit of just calling that a disruptive behavior contract for non-payment of EES. What I think you're referring to is not a contract per se, but it does say in the House rules that if I am carrying a negative balance, that I am back to a curfew like a new member, and I'm back to not having nights out. That is correct. So if I have a negative balance at all, it's not about whether I'm on a contract for it. If I have a negative balance, even if it's just $50 and I got fined at the last meeting, I am not allowed to stay out past 11 o'clock. I'm not allowed to have overnight guests until I'm back in the positive in the house. Yes.
Okay, so now if you're on a disruptive behavior contract for, of course, not following rules, being disruptive, whatever, are you automatically on an 11 o'clock curfew, or does that have to be stated on the contract?
That would have to be stated on the contract. That is not an automatic term, no. And like I was saying earlier, like, you don't just have to, I see a lot of houses that just default to like, oh, well, we're putting someone on a disruptive behavior contract, so obviously that will mean they have to go to 5 meetings a week again and they have to have an 11 o'clock curfew. That's not true.
No.
You don't have to repeat the terms of a new member contract in a disruptive behavior contract. If you think they will help, okay, I mean, if the behavior in question, for example, is the person has been, out past curfew too many nights, then it would make perfect sense to impose a stricter curfew on them. If the behavior in question is that the person's kind of acting out just personality wise, maybe they're, sort of in a way, like kind of acting like a dry drunk, like you're worried they're on the edge of, then yeah, making them go to meetings if they're not going to meetings for a while, that might be a perfectly appropriate term for a disruptive behavior contract, but only if you decide that's what's going to be in the contract as a house. Okay. So last thought about post expulsion guidelines. The idea of somebody returning after they've been expelled. So just a couple things on that. First, if you are expelled from an Oxford house for recurrence of use, you must achieve 30 days of abstinence before you can even re-interview at any Oxford house, okay? There is no clean time requirement to move into an Oxford house to begin with. You could potentially have used on Tuesday and do an interview on Friday and move into a house that night, okay? Most of our people come from either treatment or somewhere where they've gotten at least a couple weeks of, abstinence under their belt, but that is not required. But if you do live in a house and you relapse, then you must get 30 days before you can re-interview at any house. Expulsion for disruptive behavior does not require a waiting period, but it's important for us to remember that we don't want to undermine the concept of expulsion, right? Because somebody being asked to leave for 2 days and then readmitted is that's not an expulsion. So we have to treat that like it really is the consequence it's supposed to be. Make sure that you are providing information to a new house if they are interviewing someone that lived at your house and was expelled. If you're the new house, make sure you actually call the old house and ask them to tell you about that person and what happened before you vote to accept them. I have actually,
you hear that?
yeah, I've seen situations where a house, interviewed somebody, they said they used to live at this other house, they didn't bother, to call the other house, they voted, they accepted them, and then the next day they found some stuff out that made them think, oh, we don't want this person living here. And we're like, yeah, it's too late. You just accepted them. So now you can't just change your mind. You don't get to just change your mind. So ask the other house. The person, and this sort of is inherent in what I'm saying here, but they should really not at all be reapplying to the same house, okay? If I lived in an Oxford house and that group of peers was not able to support me enough for me to stay abstinent, or I lived in an Oxford house and that group of peers was not able to help me change my behavior, then I should be starting again with a new group of peers. I should be moving to another Oxford house. Obviously, that is not an option in some places. Where there's only one woman's house or only one men's house in the area. Unfortunately, this happens more with women's houses because we have less of them. So in those cases, like Harrisonburg, there's one woman's house in Harrisonburg, right? So if somebody wants to reapply to Oxford House, they're going to be reapplying to the same house. And, keep in mind, if you're the new house too, to respect the fact that the old house went through a process, and then at the end of that process, they determined the person could not live there anymore. So we don't want to just kind of make a joke or make light of the other house's decisions, which doesn't mean we can't accept someone again. It just means we need to keep that stuff in mind. And they need to resolve financial obligations. I mean, we were talking about this as far as the emails that go out. But if I want to move into a new Oxford house, I have to resolve the financial debt I have to an old house. If the new house accepts me and allows me to move in, and I have not resolved that financial obligation with the old house, then the new house will be required to pay that. And then the new house can worry about collecting that money from their new member. So keep in mind that if you don't pay attention to this stuff and you let somebody move in and they owed some house $700, your house is going to have to write a check to that other house for $700, and then you can worry about collecting it from that guy. I think that's it. That is all I have. Sorry I was late.
So
we can.
James from Washington Park says our membership contracts do state that failure to provide a sample of a UA could be considered a relapse.
Yeah, that shouldn't be in there. And I'm glad that you saw
Yeah.
that.
There, it's being edited.
It really should not be in there. In fact, I'm surprised. I'm gonna have to look at the new one. If it's in the
Yeah.
new one, that's a mistake. It should have left. There used to be references to UAing in the houses. Now, look, also, don't get me wrong. If a house decides that they're going to use a UA for a specific person for a specific suspicion, right? There's an expectation that the person's going to cooperate with that. I mean, refusing to take a drug test would be a really solid piece of information that I would use to inform my decision that I believe a relapse has occurred. Because why on earth would you refuse to take a drug test unless you'd relapsed? But no, that shouldn't be referenced in the membership contract. And when we look to combine that with the relapse contingency form I was talking about, we'll make sure that that reference isn't in there. So thank you.
Are you done with the PowerPoint?
Yes, I am.
Can you stop screen share?
Sure, yeah.
Paul, I have a question, or I just want to go over something. In regards to the disruptive behavior contract and the day, it's a 30-day contract. But let's say the person is on the disruptive behavior contract because of EES delinquency. So obviously the deadline is much sooner than that 30 days. It's due that Saturday. But does the disruptive behavior order stand for those 30 days in that, okay, they resolved the EES Saturday, but now next week or 2 weeks later, they're doing the same thing with the EES, not paying the EES. Rather than starting all over again, waiting for that 2-week window, they're on a disruptive behavior contract for 30 days. So if they're late with their
I understand.
EES,
No.
Yeah, okay.
No, the answer is no, that is not the case. It does not extend itself past the deadline for them to make good on that money. Now, if you have a person in your house and they are chronically over a period of time getting, a negative balance and then paying off negative balance, paying off negative balance, paying off, I could see a house deciding they might want to put them on a disruptive behavior contract that says you can't even get behind a small amount. But let me just say this. If you guys just enforce the rules as they are written in your house rules and don't worry about extra disruptive behavior contracts for non-payment of ES, but just enforce the rules as they're written there, you will do just fine. You will do great. Okay. Most of the houses run into trouble, not because they're failing to put someone on a disruptive behavior contract for that reason, but they're not even enforcing the rules that they already have in their house rules. But that's a good question.
Does anybody else have any questions?
There's a hand.
I have a question. My curiosity runs into something a little bit different. What about renters insurance? Since we're all living under a different type of lease capacity, is it required for us to get it? I mean, how is our belongings secured if, God forbid, a fire break out or we're robbed? I mean, is this something that we can get on our own?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So when we enter lease agreements with individual landlords, right, we don't allow them to put in the lease terms that they are forcing or requiring that the house get renters insurance, because collectively as a house, that can be challenging. The entity that is your house is not necessarily one that it's easy to go get renters insurance for, but you as individuals absolutely can get renters insurance, and it's very cheap and it's a smart idea. And Travis, you want to say something about that?
I have renter's insurance. I pay $11 a month and it covers all my personal belongings and my vehicle at this house.
There you go.
Yeah, several members in my house have it too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great idea. We probably should promote or encourage it more. It's a great idea.
Devin has his hand up. Devin, you want to go?
Yeah, I just wanted to see, can you email out that presentation, that PowerPoint? Or are you gonna
Sure.
add it to the website?
I think we'll probably end up posting it on the state website, so
Yes.
it should end
Okay.
up being up there relatively soon.
I also recorded this, so got that too.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Deborah, Chapel Hill, or Rebecca, who, yeah, Deborah. You're muted. Chapel Hill.
Hi, my name is Deborah from Chapel Hill. My question is about a member on financial contract. If they cannot pay their funds that time, 10 p.m. due date, can we make a decision to have them make payments, installation? How does that work?
No,
Installment?
no, not really. No,
Right.
no. That's the whole point of the way that sort of expectation for payment of ES is structured in Oxford House is the idea that people need to stay like very current, and payment plan contracts are not part of the model.
Okay.
So
I
they're
didn't
Really
all
not part
very
of the model. That's not,
specific.
so, and that's one of the reasons, like when people say, oh, they're on a financial contract,
Mhm.
usually what they mean is the house has decided to allow them to pay a little bit each week toward their debt, and they shouldn't be doing that. I mean, I promise you, you'll just end up creating more trouble for yourself. You are unlikely to collect all the money. Like if you allow people to get behind such that they have to make payments, then I promise you more people will get behind because they've seen it happen to other people. They know they can get away with it.
Yes.
You would be well served to just stick to those rules as they are written.
I thank you so much.
Sure.
Can I say something about that, Paul?
Yeah.
I find that houses that enforce and it starts with the $25 fine if it's late, even if they put it in there Sunday morning, that's a $25 fine. I find that houses that do that and follow once someone's behind 2 weeks that it's due, the next time EES is due, they don't have problems with people getting behind an EES in their house. The houses that have problems with people not paying their EES on time are houses that allow excuses and reasons why people can't pay their EES. If I move into a house and I see that 3 house members are behind and they come to the house meeting, well, yeah, this happened and I'm really short this week. And the house says, it's okay, it's fine. That signals to me that this house doesn't take that very seriously.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Chapel Hill has their hand raised.
Yeah, not to mention that if you take that approach as a house, you're going to be stuck every week in your house meeting, wasting 15, 20 minutes listening to some BS story about somebody's reason why they can't pay ES. And so not only are you not bringing in the money you need to pay your bills, but your meeting is being hijacked by stuff that you shouldn't even be having to deal with. Yes, sorry, Gabby.
Hi. So going on that with the being behind in the EES, if a member is behind and they put a certain amount in, but they don't have the full amount to meet that disruptive behavior contract of paying by 10 p.m. on Saturday when the EES is due, should they start looking for other arrangements to find somewhere else to live? How does that go?
I mean, I would certainly recommend they do. I mean, you've got a disruptive behavior contract that says at that point, right, that they're more than 2 weeks behind, therefore they have to pay the full balance by 9:59 p.m. on Saturday. And if they don't, I mean, the disruptive behavior contract calls for expulsion. In reality, as I discussed in this presentation, you don't get expelled for disruptive behavior from an Oxford house unless the house votes that you're going to be expelled. So there is still a step after that that requires that the house actually have the will to carry out their disruptive behavior contracts and vote yes to expel. I have certainly seen situations where houses wrote up a disruptive behavior contract, whether that was for non-payment of ES or for other behaviors. The contract got broken. The house called in a meeting. They discussed all the issues. And in the end, the vote did not carry to expel. Do I think there might be situations from time to time where that's an appropriate response on the part of the house? Maybe. But I also think you are going down a very slippery slope when you start sending out the message that these disruptive behavior contracts are negotiable, that maybe I don't even really have to do it, and I can just kind of sweet talk my way into not getting kicked out of the house. I would caution you very strongly from letting that happen. And if you're in a new house, you can't let that happen. If you're in a new house, if you're conditionally chartered, if you haven't paid off your loan, you have no choice but to enforce your rules as they are written. You know, if you're in a permanently chartered house, you're doing okay, you're following the conditions, you're a charter, we will give you the rope to hang yourself. We will hope that you do not hang yourself, but we will give you the rope.
Let's not forget that if someone's on a disruptive behavior contract for financial reasons, what's stopping the house from trying to help that member, depending on what the situation is for, whether they were sick or something crazy, on finding local resources to help pay the EES, like all about trying to help point in the right direction at the same time as just not putting them on a contract and then being like, oh, if you don't pay this by 9/59, you're out, you know?
Yeah, agreed.
Ella has their hand raised.
Cool. Hey, Oxford House Outlet.
How you doing, sir?
All right.
My question is more along the lines of Travis there about the outside help. Now, if a member were to come in and he were to receive help, like we do a lot of times, have members that have community action help them, and sometimes it'll take 4 to 5 weeks for their monies to come in. So therefore, their monies have ran out by the time it, you know, as far as time lapse, as far as rent goes,
Right.
by the time it even shows up. And still, you know, they might be looking at being a disabled person, or if they're, you know, someone has the inability to find a job right off the bat, but they're kind of floating on this $600 that they receive from community action.
Right. So our model does create an obstacle because the houses are financially self-supporting, right? Because they run themselves. Like sometimes it is an obstacle to get into a house, to get that 2 weeks in the move-in fee. I'm coming out of jail, I'm coming out of treatment, I've lost everything. So we really do value the agencies that will help people get a foot in the door in a house and get an opportunity to get a job and get situated. We want those relationships to continue. They do a great deal of good. Okay, so we have to respect those arrangements. And when a funding agency commits to paying money on behalf of someone to a house, the house is no longer going to hold that person accountable for having not paid that money. So if I have a promissory note, if I have an email from the person in charge or whatever the case may be that says that I'm getting funded for $600, then I can have a negative balance up to $600 and not be held accountable personally for that. I'm not going to get fined for it. I'm not going to be put on a disruptive behavior contract for it because the money has been promised. There is often, unfortunately, a delay. Yes. Be patient. It always comes. I mean, if they promise it, it comes. And, you know, if you're ever in a situation where you're dealing with a particular funding agency and it seems to be taking forever and a day, talk to your outreach worker about that, because sometimes they can help, you know, address that issue and see what the holdup is. But you as a house should be treating that as money. Now, don't put it in your comptroller records as paid. Like that person will still carry a negative balance. It will still indicate they paid $0 that week, but they're allowed to have up to a negative balance up to the amount that was promised.
Yeah, but my question therefore is that I came to the realization that they kind of feel like they have 6 weeks to float on, or
Yeah.
5 weeks
They
to
don't.
float on.
And that's what you pay attention
Instead
to
of-
is, yeah.
Yeah,
that-
I mean,
well,
look, as a
that's what
house,
you pay
we should
attention to.
encourage people to realize that's not true. And, you know, there are some rules about like finding a job or getting out of the house. But if they do that, then, you know, as long as you make it clear to them, project in advance, dude, you know, you're 3 weeks out, but as soon as you get to negative $601, right? I'm just using the example where they were promised 600. As soon as you get the negative 601, you're getting fined. And,
Right.
and you get any further past that, you're going on a disruptive behavior contract. So we try our best to help them understand they need to be acting during that period of time. And if they don't, well, then they may not.
And
get
not
to
scare
stay on.
them or discourage them, but just let them know. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
discourage them and think, holy shit, what did I just get myself into and being in an Oxford house, you know?
No,
But
not
just
at
let
all.
them know for real, you know, that time to get a job now, you know, unless you're on disability, it's time to get a job.
Yeah, I mean, in the times that it is right now, I mean, if you have members in the house that aren't getting a job in 2-3 weeks, It's because they're not
They're
looking,
not trying hard enough.
they're not trying.
There's a lot of
Absolutely.
jobs out there.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
a lot.
All right,
All right.
Corbin's got his hand up.
All right, Corbin.
Yeah, now I have a situation in my house where one of my members is in the hospital. You know, and he has no control over not being able to pay his rent right now.
Mhm.
So us as a house, we decided to absorb his EES while he's in the hospital because he's got a lung infection. He's got a tube hanging out of him. He can't help that. So, I mean, are we wrong for doing that or?
Houses that are permanently chartered and abiding by their charter, right, and have paid off their loan, are not wrong to decide case by case that they may have a situation where they're going to do something different than what is spelled out exactly in the rules. They're not wrong.
Right.
That's the rope that I'm talking about having given you, right? Like you get the
Yeah.
flexibility to decide in certain situations you're going to do something different. And we trust that you will make some good decisions there. Sometimes houses in those situations make bad decisions and they end up regretting it. But that's sort of part of the model. And so, yeah, I mean, a house like that has some flexibility. Now, I would caution you against just a total absolving, I don't know what the right word is, of that ES, because technically, per your charter and per the federal law, actually, that created the revolving loan funds, we're all required to pay the exact same amount in EES. So,
Right.
You'd be better off like maybe delaying that or like trying to help them find some financial assistance. I know down in Tidewater, there's a fair amount of that. But yes, as a house, if you decide that's appropriate, you can do it.
Okay.
What other questions we got?
Joseph from Chesapeake.
Joseph.
I ain't have a question. I just want to say good morning, everybody, and thank y'all.
All right. Good morning. to
Thank
too.
And then Lydia.
Were you just saying thank you, or did you have a question?
No,
No,
you're
just
just
say
saying
thank
thank you and
you.
hi.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I don't want to interrupt. I'm curious if we have a master list of local and statewide resources that we can give to people if we do happen to expel, or if there are people that we don't accept into the house, we can give them other resources as where to go. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my question.
And this is something I would really like all of us collectively to focus on right now. I mean, the houses, the chapter officers, I also mean my outreach team. We don't have that list in place in a lot of houses, and we need to. So we certainly would appreciate the help of you guys, okay? Like you're the local people, you know your area. So if you have some ideas about what should be included on that list, please reach out to your outreach worker, because I'm going to be asking them to make sure that for each of their areas, this list exists and that it's posted in all the houses.
I know in my region, a lot of the houses have their own because it's different areas of the county. These organizations will fund. Of course, a majority of them have the same treatment centers and things like that. But as far as funding agency goes, it depends on your location as to what churches or CSB will help that particular area. So we've always here in Northern Virginia have asked houses to create their own so that they have it. Like John has one that, I don't know if you want to share it. Paul, if you have it, we
I
can
just
share
want
it.
to say real
So it should be something that's basically done by the house and the region, not something that is backed by Oxford.
Right.
Well,
as
what I'm
far as
saying is I
Oxford,
want to
you-
see the outreach workers work with the local chapters and the houses to make these lists. But what the point Debbie's making is those lists will be different in each
Yes,
area. Yeah.
So,
of course.
real quick,
A lot of times you can call the non-emergency number, emergency medical services. Well, although they'll transport in a police car, which kind of freaks people out a little bit, but they will actually come and they have peer support that works with them, peer recovery specialist, and they will be at the hospital waiting when you take someone there. In a lot of police departments, it's a new program. It's starting across the state of Virginia called First Step, where if you're in crisis, you've been expelled, you're using whatever, you can go. I know this is a scary thought, but you can go to the police station and there's no threat of arrest, and they also have a peer team there that will help you, and they'll try to get you to shelter, to get some resources and that's called First Step. That's kind of new.
I'm trying to find John.
Real quick,
West.
I want to say that if you don't accept someone in your house, the referral process would be to another Oxford house in your area, because just because we don't accept someone at Khyber, we can still refer them to Scholar and Finn Mountain, the other two houses here.
Always direct them to Oxford vacancies if they're looking for another, if your house is full or whatever, even if it's for, disruptive behavior, we always say, if you want to get back into an Oxford house, go to oxfordvacancies.com. Always send them to that website.
So that should be on the list as well.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
Okay.
John, you have your list.
So,
I have mine. I don't know that I could present it or that it would be.
I think give me a second. I'll find it real quick here. There's something else I wanted to mention before we cut everybody loose, because I know it's been an hour and a half, and if there's still questions, we can maybe field them individually, but I do want to mention one thing. Of course, I can't multitask, so asking me to find John's.
Well, I could do some filler while you're looking for that.
No, that's all right. I'll find it, but I want to make this point before we lose a lot of people. So, and it is related to relapse and expulsion to a certain degree. But I made a reference at the beginning of this about how there's kind of a microscope on Oxford House lately. And part of why that is happening is because we have unfortunately had a few situations where people have overdosed fatally and not been discovered right away. In a lot of other recovery housing models, there's more structure as far as the individuals having to kind of account to someone like a house manager on a daily basis or be seen. And so there are some people that are saying that our model isn't good because of that. And we are really trying to, and I mean, we agree that the idea that someone could live in an Oxford house and not be seen for 3 days and that not be something that the house would follow up on is not the way Oxford House is supposed to work at all. It's not. And I realize we all have different schedules and we're all very busy, but we need to come up with some ideas about how we can prevent that kind of thing from happening. And I can share with you one that's being used right now. And I'm actually talking to a fair number of houses. I've actually seen several houses in the last few weeks, like debate this and decide they're going to adopt this policy. And I know Deborah Jackson said there's a lot of houses down in Tidewater that do this. And what they do is, if you are not in your room, if you are out of the house, you leave your bedroom door ajar. You don't close it all the way, right? I mean, we don't have locks, outside locks on our doors anyway. So when I leave, like, it's not like my bedroom is like locked and secured, right? I mean, we live in a family, right? So we don't do that. We're not allowed to do that, actually. So if we leave the door ajar, then the house knows that means we're not around. And when you come home and you go into your room, by all means, of course, shut the door. Hell, shut the door and turn the little privacy lock if you really need to. But that will be a signal to the house as to whether or not you're there or not, and can give them an idea as to whether or not you need to be checked on. Because if the door's closed for like a solid day, then that would suggest that maybe you're in there and haven't come out in a day. So you can talk about that in your houses. I don't want to see us reach a point where we have to sort of impose that kind of a policy on the houses. I don't think it'll come to that. But if you're not going to do something like that, then you better come up with some other good system and tell us about it if you come up with it, that will allow you to ensure that we're keeping enough of an eye on each other, that we're not letting people go into the rooms and isolate and, God forbid, use and die.
Isn't that what travel log is for?
Well, no, because the travel log is only something that's generally gets used when someone's going to be out of the house overnight or out past curfew.
Or have
Like, we
some-
don't have a system in place. Now, that could be one solution to this. You know, I don't mean, like, I like the door idea a lot better than the idea that I would have to sign in and sign out of my house every time I leave to go to the corner store to get a pack of cigarettes, right? Like, there are some houses in the past that have done that system. Maybe there are some that still do. I don't think that's really what Oxford is supposed to be about, monitoring people's movement and behavior to that degree. So I don't really like that as a solution. But yeah, generally speaking, the travel log is about overnights and staying out past curfew.
It's just people not being seen for 24, 48 hours and.
Yeah. I mean, look, you know, you could have like something where the president or the coordinator or somebody like has to put eyes on everybody every 24 hours. And if they don't, by the end of the evening, they got to knock on their door and check. I mean, that's another, there are a few different things we could do. But what I'm saying is go talk about this in your houses and institute one of them, because we have to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. And the truth of the matter is, in most of those cases, that person probably, there was not a whole lot we were going to be able to do, right? I mean, even if we like realized the next morning we hadn't seen them, but you never know, all right? And we all have Narcan in the houses, and people's lives have been saved in Oxford House because we caught them, we saw what was happening, we had Narcan and we used it. So, you know, you could potentially be talking about saving a life here.
And I'm gonna share this, Paul.
Yeah. Oh, excellent.
Okay, so this is a list that Fair Hill has hanging on their bulletin board for their members. I'm
I would
assuming.
assume they would also maybe even hand a copy to a person as they were.
So just kind of, you can see.
Right.
Suicide prevention, hospitals, community services boards, treatment facilities, organizations for funding. As you can see, it's different areas, different organizations. They've got the AA and NA meetings listed. And the 2 websites.
Cool. Yeah.
It's a great outline too. I like how it's set up.
Yeah.
That's Carrie. We have very talented people in our house here in Fairhill, Chapter 1.
Can we get it? Can I get a Word document of that so I can use it as a template?
Yes, we'll email it out to all the houses just as a template.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, John.
It's the print, Paul.
Brittany, you got a question?
I don't have a question. I was actually just gonna say about the door thing, leaving the door ajar. That happened to us in our house over the summer, where someone passed away in a room and we didn't find her until the afternoon. So I feel like, looking back, if we had that policy, it really would have made a difference.
Okay. There you go. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
All right, it's been an hour and 45, so we're going to cut you guys loose. If you have questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to